Singapore, one of the richest and most developed countries in the world. It is currently ranked 11th on the world HDI rankings with an HDI of 0.938. The small island off the coast of Malaysia has been known for its prestigious and expensive lifestyle. But such an upscale country is not open to everyone. Recently, Singapore has been forcing out middle and lower income people. But why? On the 28th of January, 1819, British Governor Stamford Raffles came to the Kingdom of Singapore. He noticed the natural location and structure of the island and determined the location was suitable for a new trade port. 5 years later, a treaty was signed with the Kingdom of Singapore that allowed the entire island to be a British colony, with it later becoming a part of British India in 1826. In 1860, the island grew to around 80,000 people. More than half of that population were Chinese immigrants working on pepper plantations. In 1867, the Straits settlements were separated from British India and were going under direct control of the UK. On the 17th of November, 1869, the Suez Canal opened. This connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. This decreased travel time and cost, which resulted in a rise of trade value. Singapore saw a $32 million rise just a year after the canal opened. In 1955, David Marshall won Singapore's first general election. He led a delegation to London demanding for self-rule, but Britain rejected. Only a year later, he stepped down and was replaced by Lim Yew Hock. Negotiations continued between British and Singapore's government, and eventually Britain granted Singapore full internal self-government for all matters except for defense and foreign affairs. On the 16th of September 1963, Singapore joined with Malaya, North Borneo, and Sarawak to form the Federation of Malaysia under the terms of the Malaysia Agreement. Although, even after the formation of Malaysia, tensions between Malaysia and Singapore grew. On the 9th of August 1965, less than a year after it merged, Singapore was expelled from Malaysia and became an independent country. Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore, emphasized on rapid economic growth. He oversaw significant economic reforms to the country. Support for business entrepreneurship and limitations on internal democracy formed Singapore's policies for the next half-century. The beginning of Lee's tenure was marked with success. From 1965 to 1973, annual growth of GDP was 12.7. He directed spending to repair and improved infrastructure. This effort spurred economic productivity and put in place the foundations needed to build up basic industry. In 2019, Singapore's infrastructure is ranked in terms of quality with a score of 95.4 out of 100. This is the first in the world. Unemployment in Singapore was so low that there wasn't enough data to represent the level of unemployed workers. Most of the population had experienced great strides in productivity. The government worked on technology and education. The goal was to increase the economic gain in Singapore. The government invested on its budding financial services industry. This managed to minimize inflation and provide workers with proper equipment and machinery to sustain growth. Singapore's stock increased 33 times by 1992, achieved a tenfold increase of the capital labor ratio. Living standards steadily rose, with more families moving from a lower income status to middle income security with increased household incomes. In 1990, Goh Chok Tong succeeded Lee and became Singapore's second prime minister. During his time, Singapore went through an economic crisis and a SARS outbreak in 2003. Goh stepped down in 2004, and Lee Hsien Loong, the eldest son of Lee Kuan Yew, became the country's third and most recent prime minister. The emergence of manufacturing firms in Southeast Asia challenged the nation with such a small labor force and land restrictions, but Singapore continued to grow both in population and wealth. In 2000, Singapore had a population of 4.028 million and an average monthly income of $4,398 with a yearly income of $52,776. The average monthly income in the country has doubled over the past 20 years, now $9,425 with a yearly income being over $1 million. What causes people in Singapore to be forced out? One factor is the government and how restricted life is in the country. Life in Singapore is extremely strict. No gum, no smoking, no vaping, and you can't even gather in groups of more than 3 people after 10 p.m. What this does is it keeps stability in the nation. The first 3 are simply for sanitation. You might often see in America black gum stains on the sidewalk, but in Singapore, sidewalks are perfectly clean. They don't allow gatherings after 10 because this prevents riots and protests. The reason why is because if you are not allowed to gather in such large groups, then you are not able to speak your mind as a congregation. Singapore also focuses much on the quality and the infrastructure of the city. For example, an escalator was broken at a mall. In many places in the US, that would take days, even weeks to fix. But in Singapore, the escalator would be fixed by the end of the day. Everything in the city is pretty much perfect. But in order to do this, the people must live very limited lives. This is a trade-off for the development of the country. Singapore takes away things that potentially cause the slightest of problems. They eliminate the problem before it even begins. But that is not the only cause. Employment. Employment in Singapore is extremely difficult. A combination of the forces of globalization and weakening domestic economy have wreaked havoc on the country's hard-working middle classes. There's also no minimum wage in Singapore except for security workers and construction workers. It is simply a negotiation, and oftentimes the employer will win over the employee because the employee has nowhere else to work. This can cause people to be severely underpaid. The rich will continue to be rich because they have the money, the connections, and the financial know-how to lessen their taxes, decrease wages, and protect their wealth. This leaves the middle and lower class of Singapore to shoulder the burden of taxes of the country. This is an example of post-structural geography. People with money get what they want. Another cause of forcing out natives in Singapore is migration. Migration to Singapore has caused a decrease in jobs for native residents. Like many developed countries, immigration to Singapore is high due to the pull factors that attract people. For example, an opportunity for employment, education, and better standards of living. Just like any other developed country, the migrants to Singapore are willing to work for way less than the residents with companies' notice. Because of this, companies tend to provide more jobs to migrants, leaving fewer and fewer jobs to natives. For natives with jobs, they barely get job promotions and increase in wages, leaving them feel stuck in the social class with no escaping.
So, what are the effects of lower and middle class Singaporeans being forced out of the country? Well, one effect is the overall gross domestic product and gross national income per capita increase. As lower income people are being evicted from their homes in Singapore, we see an increase in average income there. Serious cases of eviction began in the late 1980s as the country focused on its economy. In 1990, the country's Human Development Index was only 0.721. After serious evictions took place throughout the 1990s, the Human Development Index in Singapore rose an entire tenth of a decimal point, all the way to 0.821 in 2000. Singapore continues to get richer and richer, with a Human Development Index of 0.909 in 2010 and 0.938 in 2019. But the poor people have no jobs and no place in the Singaporean economy as the country gets richer. On the surface, we see a powerful, wealthy economy full of affluent and smart people, but what might be on the inside is a large degree of mistreating some less fortunate people there. Another effect of the decrease of middle and working class people in Singapore is a decrease in certain services and goods. The working class, such as waiters and sales managers on average, pay about $80,000 a year, give or take, especially because there is no minimum wage. Employers and managers in Singapore are able to pay certain workers very little. So, there is some very cheap work in Singapore. But cheap labor in Singapore can't be sustained by the country itself because of the overall cost of living there. The average yearly income in Singapore is over $1 million, so Singapore is a very expensive and difficult place to live. If you are part of the working class, the cost of living can be deadly. But the working class is essential for any society or civilization to function. So, we are left with a large predicament. Workers in Singapore are being severely underpaid and are currently in a struggle to live in a city such as Singapore due to the very high costs of living. So, these workers are leaving Singapore, either intentionally or being evicted, to search for more economic opportunity in the neighboring countries. But without the working class, Singapore, or any country, is unable to function properly. Finally, eliminating the middle and lower classes in Singapore will increase the middle class population in neighboring countries such as Malaysia. If someone is priced out of any country, then they would probably just move to another nearby country. Malaysia is very close to Singapore. People will migrate north in search of a lower cost of living, higher wages compared to the people living there, and better job opportunities. You will see large amounts of migration of lower and middle class Singaporeans to Malaysia. This will increase the middle and overall population of Malaysia. The increase in middle class population in Malaysia can also help develop the economy, as the middle and working class are vital for the growth and development of a country. The pricing out of the middle class sounds good in theory for the country, as it increases the average income and the Human Development Index. But it will also cause services in the country to decrease, as most of the middle and lower classes work in the service industry. It can also increase in population in other countries that offer more opportunities for lower and middle class people.